Hello and welcome. I'm Julie Fogel, the Marketing Director here at CuriWorks, and I'll be your host for today's webinar where we present our top 10 takeaways from CommunityLIVE 2022. As we've come to expect from the annual Highlands Software User Conference, this past September's event did not disappoint. It also provided a great deal of information, and we've spent the past couple of weeks distilling 3 days of content down to create this top 10 list. A few housekeeping items before we begin. We have muted the attendees' microphones, but we do want to make sure you're able to engage with us. So please do utilize the chat box feature or drop questions on the topics and share your struggles if you have any, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the session. We're also recording today's webinar, and we'll share a link to it when we're finished with it, and you can share it with your colleagues. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Eric Willis joins us. He is our newly named Chief Executive Officer. He's held a number of positions here at CuriWorks throughout his 12-year tenure with the organization, most recently Chief Commercial Officer. Joining Eric is John Swisher. He first joined CuriWorks as a Senior Sales Engineer in 2014. He's held various roles since then in solution development before becoming CuriWorks Vice President of Sales and Product in December of 2020. Collectively, John and Eric bring more than 30 years of experience with Highlands on-base platform to today's conversation. Let's get started. John?
Perfect, thanks, Julie. Move forward a slide here.
Well, first of all, 30 years.
Yeah,
I feel kind of old. I don't know, 30 years, man.
That was
collectively. I didn't want to out you guys, but yes, collectively 30
still,
years.
That's only 2 people. So
yeah. I was not prepared to hear that number.
Yeah.
Julie.
Are you even 30 years old?
Almost. No, I'm definitely over 30.
Wow.
Wow, that took me off my game. So let's get back into it, and let's talk about a word that keeps getting thrown around, or at least I've been hearing it thrown around a lot, and that's hyperautomation, right? So what is hyperautomation? Well, I've thrown the Gartner definition up here, but if I put it into my own words, it really means automating a process wherever it makes sense, through the use of multiple different technologies working together in tandem. And there's 2 parts with that to me are the key parts. It's wherever it makes sense, right? And through the use of multiple technologies, right? So wherever it makes sense, think about maybe there's a regulatory reason or a reason tied to safety or security where something may not be automated, right? Or maybe it's just part of a process that truly does require a human to make a decision, right? So when we talk about all of those different multiple technologies, and you kind of see a busy screen here, in this session at CommunityLIVE, Sam Babbitt gave an example of a self-healing factory, and that's what you're seeing here, right? So whenever we dive into these individual aspects of this diagram here, we're talking about sensor data, is sent via a trigger that verifies an order, that checks against inventory, uses AI and machine learning for logistics and supply chain, etc. And then what Sam did was talk about, what this particular self-healing factory utilizes from the Highlands standpoint. And you can see those items highlighted in blue here, as well as those technologies that we integrate with in this scenario, right? And in this scenario, Highlands managing the authentication, verifying against the blockchain. Workview and Forms are creating groups and channels and teams or Slack based on the creation of maybe a Workview object, right? RPA is updating the old ERP that doesn't have an API, for example, and maybe triggering to update where something was delivered from on-base workflow, right? The same orders can be triggered from on-base based on AI or machine learning based off of data that was collected and aggregated by tools like Tableau and Power BI, some of those ones that you're seeing on the right-hand side of the screen. So drawing additionally from data warehouses like Snowflake or Azure Synapse or Amazon Redshift. So what does all of this hyper automation and all of these integrations and these technologies working together get you? Well, it's speed, right? The long story short here is today the amount of data that we're generating and the amount of tools and technologies that we've already invested in and the new tools that you'll be evaluating and investing in all play a significant role, in your hyper automation journey to getting results faster. And we have your back, right? CureWorks and Highland have your back through these integrations with those technologies that you're already using today or plan to use in the future.
John, before we go to number 2, can you go back 2 slides?
I can try.
Yeah, one more, yeah. So I think one of my takeaways from this and why we brought it in here was that I had a couple of customers at the conference. They were like, well, okay, so on the main stage, we've got Sam Babick talking about hyper automation. I've heard it at my office. Is this a new platform I need to invest in? And I think my biggest takeaway for those customers was like, no, you've already invested. I mean, if you look at all of the bullet points on the slide here, right? We've got artificial intelligence with the information that's occurring with inside of a brainware, right? We've got robotic process automation with Highland RPA. We've got low-code integration tools. We've got low-code app building tools. We have the whole workflow process automation suite. So all of these little areas, we've got checkboxes to allow you to build your hyper automation solution. And again, to your point on speed, you've already got a lot of the tools that are already there. And I think that was my big takeaway is that, yes, this is this new term. This is this new idea. And it's a lot of things people are talking about. But I think where our customers have the biggest advantage is that they already have the tools in place today.
Yeah,
so they can just take what they've already bought and start figuring out, okay, how can I quickly address those issues you talked about, those small, quick hitting ones where I can get some quick wins in this environment. So that was my big takeaway, right? Is you've got a lot that you already have to address this need, and there's just little holes that some of you may be able to fill. I know point number 2 is to talk about RPA, which I know is a solution a lot of our customers don't have today.
Yeah, and to further drive that point, hyper automation is not a new module or tool that Highland has, right? And to Eric's point, making that investment that you've already made, really the only investment now that's required is time with CureWorks, right? To drive hyper automation throughout your entire organization. And Eric set me up nicely for our point number 2, and that's that customers are driving tangible results with RPA. RPA being one of my favorite new topics, this is one that I feel can easily be a game changer for any organization in attendance today. And for those of you who are asking yourself, well, what is RPA, John? Well, it's short for robotic process automation. And what it really involves is training these virtual robots, so they're not the robots that you think of on TV. These are virtual robots that live on a computer, and you're training them to perform likely the same tasks that you or your coworkers perform on their computer today, right? So imagine you need to regularly go out to a website or portal to check on the status of something, right? So whether it be a background check or maybe a contract status, an external review, et cetera, these are perfect tasks for bots to perform and come back and actually update your record for you in OnBase automatically. I think one of my favorite parts about it is that RPA doesn't fit into a box, right? So we've seen certain modules where, hey, it performs exactly as it should for this use case. Well, RPA can work essentially anywhere. It can perform simple repetitive tasks, allow for integrations with legacy apps that don't have APIs. They can hold you over until the next application is delivered, or a plethora of other possibilities, right? And there are a couple of real world examples that I wanted to highlight that were discussed at CommunityLIVE. The first one being Funeral Director's Life. Now, if you have not watched the webinar that Highland did with Kyle at Funeral Director's Life, I would highly recommend it. He does go pretty detailed into the entire process that they built into their contracting solution, but ultimately they built bots to assist in the processing of their contracts. And they went from staff staying late every night to today where bots are processing 95% of those 2,000 contracts a week. That's a big number of contracts per week, saving them about 900 hours a year. And if you think about that from like a full-time employee example, that's almost half a year of a full-time employee that they were able to save utilizing these bots. And one quote from Kyle that I thought was great. He's their vice president of development. And he was just pointing out that, while Highland RPA can work with any application as it should, it was designed to easily integrate with OnBase, allowing the addition of these bots to workflows or OnBase processes even easier, right? Now, another one that I was not familiar with until attending CommunityLIVE was Horry County, South Carolina. And these folks were inundated with property tax returns. They turned to OnBase and RPA to reduce via paper forms. They integrated with a legacy software application and automatically keyed a lot of that return data in via RPA bots, right? So in their first year, they were able to have bots process 1/3 of the 90,000 returns, again, freeing folks up for higher value, more rewarding type work, essentially taking 2 months out of a yearly process. So a huge amount of time savings, because again, these bots, they don't take breaks.
Yeah,
they work 24/7.
And I think that's the biggest value besides the measurable FT savings, things like that, is your last bullet there, right? The higher value work, whether that's value from a business process, but also I was at a healthcare conference the week before CommunityLIVE. And when we talked about RPA with a lot of these providers, the resounding feedback was my staff is just burdened with administrative tasks, and I'm having to take them away from the bedside, from the patient, and not give clinical care because they have all this administrative work. So for them, it wasn't a FTE cost savings, but it was how do we improve the clinical experience, improve the care of our patients by taking all of this administrative keying and looking up information, having to do prior authorizations to the healthcare payers away from their clinical staff. So it's definitely a shift of how you're thinking there, is that I'm not just trying to automate a process. It's also, I'm trying to relieve that burden so people can spend the time where we're actually paying them to spend time.
Yeah, but then also for your employees as well, even if they may not be in that clinical sense, just having a more rewarding sense of work and not doing those repetitive tasks every day. And Tim, the CIO over at Horry County, had a quote that I wanted to bring up as well, speaking to the integration with OnBase, which Tim, again, being the CEO for Horry County, said it best. It was a no-brainer for him compared to another vendor in the market.
Well, I think one of the other big takeaways I had was, and this was partly going into the conference, John, I think a sense from talking to customers, talking to some of even our employees, that, hey, I feel like Highland really hasn't added a ton to OnBase in the last couple of releases. And maybe I tended to agree, and maybe I just haven't spent the time really digging into it. But one of my biggest takeaways was there's actually a ton of information, ton of new product or enhancements that were put into 22.1. So I just wanted to spend some time going through some of those enhancements. Some of them are small, like the first one here with OnBase Mobile. It might seem small to some of you on the phone who are just US based, but I also know we have a lot of customers that are beginning to have end users who are participating in business processes, and a lot of times are occasional users that may need just to access something via on-base mobile. So it now has language support for French, German, Japanese, Portuguese, Chinese simplified, and Thai, which is a big step forward as Highland also continues to be more of a international company. The other side of it that from an on-base mobile perspective is on-base mobile is now just part of the product, right? Yeah. We don't have this on-base mobile for iPad, for Windows, for iPhone, for Android, back in the day for BlackBerry, right? Now it just consumes either a named user or concurrent client. So you're able to now extend on-base through Highland Mobile and on-base mobile without any additional cost besides getting it all set up and rolled out. It just consumes those same licenses that they had today. So a great opportunity to extend on-base out to those mobile end users.
Just a much more simplified way to license in general.
Yep. And then folders and file cabinets. When I worked at Highland back in the day, this was one of my products I worked with. So I have it near and dear to my heart. And it was always a challenge to set up, even though there was immense value in it. So a lot of these updates and enhancements were more just usability oriented, except for the last one I really wanted to highlight, which was the ability to auto folder documents with that workflow action. We've had that workflow action for years, but one of the challenges with it was, if people know, a doc type is set up to multiple folder types, or can be set for multiple folder types. So when I would trigger that action, it would try and folder that document in every folder type it was associated to. And we either had to do things like proxy e-forms to be able to stop it from going in. And you had all these like workarounds. You can make it work. So now you can actually, in that workflow action, target a specific folder type. So even if that document type is set up to go to 10 folders, that workflow action can drive it to one particular folder type. The first two are more just parity related. These were features that existed, but now they either exist on the web client that it didn't before, and now Unity client for the send to, move to, and copy to. I thought about whether or not to include this because we don't have a ton of customers on SAP, but we do have maybe a half dozen or so. So just some overall enhancements from AP automation for SAP. So for the whole capturing of value-added tax code. So the key here is that now that's at the line level. So previously before it could not. So now I can capture those VAT codes at the line level, pass that information over to SAP. The other side of it was that when I capture those VAT codes and that registration and data, is I can now validate that information against SAP. So now, yes, I was able to capture that before, but the big change here is that validation step of being able to validate that data that I captured off of the information in SAP. And then finally was just the ability to process both a mix of PO and non-PO invoices at the same time. So it's obviously a fringe use case, right? But we haven't had the ability to do it before. And I think if I recall from the session I went to, this translates beyond just AP automation for SAP, but AP automation across some of the other ERP systems like Workday, et cetera. How this usually comes up is if I've submitted a PO, it's in the process, and I need to add something to it. So there might be a line item of that overall order that is PO based and then non-PO based because there was an add-on midstream. So before that was a whole exception process. Now we can handle it just like anything else. And then Unity Forms. There's a lot of updates here, mostly related to admin functions. So before, on the left-hand side here, of just being able to disable custom actions, you might think, well, why is that such a big deal, right? Well, the big thing is, if you're building a really complex form with a lot of custom actions and something's not working, it's really hard to troubleshoot it, right? So now I can go in and I can disable specific custom actions so that when I go and do my troubleshooting, I can narrow down what of those custom actions is actually causing the error to occur.
Yeah, and in a lot of those more complex forms, a lot of custom actions are dependent on one another and chained in a row. And this right here is huge for troubleshooting any of those changes.
And I think along those same lines with the searching for custom actions, when you have those chained actions and I'm trying to find where it was and I've got a form with maybe 20 different custom actions that are more, now we just have a simple search custom actions field that's in there so you can key it in, search it, and it'll find it right within the form where you are.
Yeah, and this is something that Zach always used to get me for when we were building out solutions, and work on your naming conventions for these custom actions. And while Zach is great at it, not everyone is, right? And this again is a great way to be able to search for those where we maybe haven't done the best naming conventions.
And then last but not least, but this was one where, so when I was in the OnBase general session room at CommunityLIVE, this one got a standing ovation from the admins in the room. It sounds like the most simple thing in the world, but we didn't have it before. You can now cut and paste elements of a Unity form, not just within one form, but also across forms. Obviously, both forms have to be up at the same time, but I can now, if I've designed a really nice form and I've got this great element here and I want to bring it over to another form, I can now copy it from one to the other. If I have sections where I want to repeat a similar function in it, I can cut and paste that as well. Yeah. So again, small thing, but a huge win for those of you that design a lot of Unity forms.
Speed, for sure.
And then from a workflow standpoint, just a couple ones here I wanted to highlight, which is, this is also another one, the new action of Call REST API that got a big audible applause from the audience, because everyone's like, well, you guys have had REST APIs for a while.
Yep.
I don't have the ability to just easily call it from workflow. What's going on here? So this was a huge win for those folks that have already started moving over to using the REST API, that I can now call that API directly from workflow without having to do anything custom. Along that API front is a new test type for API tests. The idea here is that I can have an API test that is listening to something that's happening in another application. So let's say that you have a core claims system where your claim status changes. This API test can watch for that claim API change, and then based off of that change, go and update a value in OnBase. Mm-hmm. So, and then once that is updated, obviously all of your automation can occur that already exists in OnBase. So this allows you to now start being able to listen to what's happening in that other system. Now, this does not take away the whole idea of building a true data Correct. Integration. This is much more designed for that ad hoc nature where this maybe doesn't happen all the time, but we need to be able to track it and know what's going on. And the last one was just, again, a parity update of just being able to, for workflow approval management, be able to see that approval status in the web client.
Yeah.
And you're going to start seeing more and more things like this. I mean, the web client is almost in parity with everything right now, but as more and more customers continue to migrate to the web client, you'll start to see more and more of these small little improvements from a web standpoint. And then WorkView, again, a lot of updates here related to admin functions and usability, which again is, I think, a consistent theme, John, I think for OnBase updates as a whole is, how do we make it easier to use? How do we make it easier to administer? Mm-hmm. So the first one here is custom actions now exist within WorkView, which you see John getting all excited. I mean, yeah. For a lot of the things that we have here, whether it's making something visible, require read-only, it was all scripting before.
100%.
And to have to then update, and for us, right, a lot of you know that we build repeatable solutions on top of WorkView. A lot of that nice look and feel that our product development team has developed is from scripting. But then when we roll it out and need to modify, we're having to modify those scripts. So having this now natively within inside of WorkView, one, allows us to build it in a way which is going to easily upgrade. We're not going to have issues with scripting, easier to roll out to customers when it's new, but also easy for you to modify. You don't need to understand our script. If you want to change how a view looks, you can now make that modification. The other addition was the addition of screen pop. So we've had object pop in the past, but when I did object pop, I popped the whole entire WorkView object with the multiple tabs, etc. Now I can choose just one screen to pop. So if that user only needs to see one element of that overall object, I can just send a URL to that specific screen, have it pop, have them interact with it, etc.
Yeah, essentially a simplified view, and we've been playing around with these recently as a way to accept an input from an end user, a simple screen where they can say yes, no, or answer a question.
Yep. Well, even with that, there's even better tools
in Unity forms now too.
Old uniforms, but also in WorkView from a design perspective. And we've got things now with collapsible sections.
Yep.
We've got those modal windows.
Yep.
They were talking about those modal windows can be shifted, adjusted, designed, ribbonless views. So if you want to get rid of that whole on-base ribbon, not make it confusing for those end users, you can get rid of that whole ribbon. So when they open it up, it looks like a purpose-built application for those users. There's also action buttons.
Yep.
So there's just, from a design perspective, Highland's really taking that step forward to look at WorkView as a low-code application development platform.
Absolutely.
Just a couple other things which I kind of touched on here already on the Unity and workflow side, but on the WorkView side also just there's 60 new pre-built configurable styles. There's better access to the CSS configuration. Also I already talked about the action buttons for client-side API action buttons. So again, a lot here from building solutions, right? From Unity forms to workflow to WorkView. And then finally, web server. As I mentioned, there's just continuing to be a lot of enhancements from a web server perspective. The first thing is there is a sunsetting of the ActiveX controls. This is partially tied to Microsoft's sunsetting IE 11 from last June. IE was really the only thing that used those ActiveX. So any of those features are now leveraged through desktop host services and available through all of our supported operating systems and browsers. But then within the web server, they also made a lot of UI enhancements, mostly focused on usability and accessibility, changing the contrast ratio, darkening some of the colors, rounding some of the buttons, just creating a whole better user experience. And then that brings me to number 4.
Big one.
It's a big one. It's surprisingly a big one.
It actually is.
It is, for those that don't know, you ready?
I'm ready.
I mean, you already know, but the people on the phone don't. This is the #1 requested enhancement all time on Community. All time.
All time?
All time. So there is now dark mode from an on-base perspective. And you might be thinking dark mode, I don't know dark mode. And I was probably in that house, maybe just a couple months ago. But like, if you look at like, this is my Google.
You've converted.
I'm a dark mode convert. Google, Word. I've got my Outlook up here. Teams, everything is in dark mode. So
what else should be in dark mode?
We now have on-base 22.1 in dark mode. So John's going to show some screenshots of some platform updates. You'll also see more of that dark mode translate to the new admin panel and some of the other things that are coming up. So I know it seems little, but it's huge from an on-base perspective for them to be able to have that experience that everyone else has within those applications. It hits a younger audience. It also addresses a lot of usability issues. I mean, for folks, especially that are designing and building and using on-base all day, having dark mode as a option is a huge win.
Yeah, I mean, this originated from more of like developers are living there every day, but for folks that are living in Outlook every day, like you and me, we want some of those same type of
Outlook, I've noticed it a lot
features.
Lately, like in Word, like reading contracts and just being able to have dark mode within Word has been a healthy benefit to my life.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So I'll throw it back over to you. Talk about number 5.
Yeah, so we have a bunch to talk about here in case you haven't picked up on this already for the admins, right? So, and this is really just Highland's continued investment towards a platform to hopefully make admins' jobs easier and easier every single year, right? So we have a lot to talk about, but first up, and Eric alluded to this, is the brand new administration portal. We have a few updates to the administrative REST APIs. Part of Highland's change control suite, this has been around for a while, but I'm not sure everyone is aware of it. It's a server up there, but environment value management. Some nice updates to server updater, and then a couple of new additions to third-party compatibility. So we have a lot to discuss. On-base administration portal is up first. So brand new to On-Base Foundation 22.1 is a new component to what we would classify as like on-base configuration, right? It's brand new, it's web-based, and it's for controlling and configuring, at least right now, frequently accessed on-base options, right? So the goal here is really to improve the administrative perspective for hosted customers, but the good news is that this tool is available to everyone. So whether or not you're in GCS or you're on-premise, this is a great way to get used to administering the way that you would in the cloud now, right? Prior to making that move. Now, this is the first release of this product. So it really, again, is focused on the most used config items like users, groups, document types, keywords. So what does it look like? And as Eric again alluded to, we have this brand new product in dark mode, and it is worth mentioning that, if you're not a convert, you still want the regular light mode, you can do that as well. You can access that right from the manager drop down up in the top right. But how do we get there, right? Again, you can access this from Studio, or as you see here, access it just from a web browser, which again, as Highland moves to more of that web first look, I personally love the fact that I can just open up a browser. I don't have to go and find a local icon, hit start, search for it. I can just hit my favorites and be taken right to any one of these config tools.
I think with that benefit too, though, is that as companies that continue to expand on-base, the management of on-base,
True.
This is also a great tool, especially because it's lightweight, to be able to give this to your desktop support team that they don't have access to all of On-Base Studio. They don't have access to, even though you can control it, but access to workflows and work views and all that kind of stuff. But hey, I need to offload user administration, doc type, keyword administration off to another group.
Yeah,
this is a perfect tool for that too, especially as companies are trying to separate those things from a security and control aspect.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And so right here on the screen, you just see a quick example with navigation to different sections within, in this case, a user profile. So you can see here in the top right-hand corner, I guess quadrant highlighted in pink, you have the ability to view that user information, security options, user groups, any administration rights, and then more towards the center of the screen, you can see editing that user, changing their password, locking, unlocking, so on and so forth. So as we go through, a very similar type look and feel, and I keep kicking Eric's desk, so I'll try and be aware of that. For keywords, again, providing the ability to edit any of those and those features up on the top right. So one of the items I'm not showing here though is when adding a new item, whether it be a user or a keyword or document type, there is a new wizard that is actually brought along with this new administration tool. And it's a very similar interface. If you're familiar with Studio, whenever you're adding a new object or workflow, it'll actually drive you through the creation of it. So you're not having to remember everything all at once. It just drives you through and makes sure you're adding all the appropriate metadata and configuration items, very user intuitive. Moving right along, again, same kind of thing here now with the document type settings. And you can see all the settings over here on the right, ability to manage keywords, doc type groups, which user groups have access if it goes to workflow, and then even some of your more advanced items and multi-instance keyword groups, so on and so forth. And then what's really nice that we don't have today is this graphical representation of how this will actually look towards the end user. So here on the document type space, if you look towards the bottom half, you can actually get a quick thumbnail preview of how these would actually appear to your end users as you're setting up different document types. So this is an exciting thing for admins in my perspective, because folks are used to doing this in config. You make a change, you would reload Unity to see those changes, and now you can do that with the click of a button. Moving right along with the new administration portal, we have our administrative REST APIs. So this is a public API that allows you to manage and create on-base configurations, but from outside of the configuration client. So this was actually released in EP4. It was, of course, enhanced in EP5. But what we just saw with the new administration portal, that's actually the result of these administrative REST APIs. So even if you're not taking advantage of the new portal and maybe you're just scripting, there are some new even endpoints for password policy settings and keyword type data sets, keyword type data set options as well. And additionally, things again, like I said before, lock, unlock users, account expirations, group administration. And for those of you who have recently upgraded to EP5, potentially, you can rest easy knowing that these features have been backported to EP5. Yes. So moving right along to our third up is the server updater. So again, for those of you not familiar, what this allows you to do is upgrade to a service pack or a service release of OnBase quickly and effectively minimizing downtime while applying the latest patch, perhaps, maybe new REST API functionality backported to EP5. Right, so it's important to mention here that you may see some differing numbering when downloading this tool from Community, as it's almost on its own release schedule. So it may not line perfectly up with what you're seeing with OnBase. But for anyone who has ever had to remember to update Windows services when you're doing any type of upgrade, and then use the command line to create a new one, I may be dating myself here with the whole 30-year type thing. They may have a better solution to that today, but wow, I love this feature because for me, putting things into the command interface, it just never worked out well for me. And now everything is nice, point and click configurable. And this may seem like a simple one as well, but we actually know where our backups were taken from. So Highland's simply just including the machine name in the file now, which makes complete sense. And this is another one like, dark mode that was added from an idea on Community. And while simple, it just goes to show, please do share your ideas, and you may actually even see it in the next release. So if you haven't seen the server updater before, here's the new version. And you can see now you can sort of search these and find your given web app, in this case, much easier, particularly for those of you with a large environment or a large number of environments. And even better, now we have those grouped in the upper left, as you can see, between the web apps, those Windows services we just talked about, backups and available updates, as well as the inclusion of support for the items highlighted in pink. How are we doing on time, Eric?
We're doing okay.
Okay, I'll try and.
No, you're good. You're good. This is important stuff.
It is, especially for all the admins out there.
Yeah, we can always speed it up at the end.
We'll speed it up at the end if we have to. And again, I feel like I'm beating this horse, but the ever so important Windows services, I know these are likely, if you're like me, the last thing that you have to do to make sure in an upgrade. And these can go super easy, but man, why not ensure that they're going to go super easy and just utilize this tool instead of the command line? Almost there. The latest update to Highland's change control suite is called Environment Value Management. And as I was kind of going through these past couple of days, I decided I'm just going to call it EVM.
I agree. I was just about ready to say that.
Great minds, right?
EVM.
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 So this, like the previous was new to, well, the last one was new to EP4. This is new to EP5. But if it's new to those of you on the phone, it allows you as administrators likely to define sets of your environmental values for the different systems and environments. So I may have per environment different settings for my app server info, work view notifications, dip paths, so on and so forth. Essentially values specific to that particular environment, right? So so that when you refresh, I know a lot of you are considering upgrading in the near future. So you have all of those settings saved, stored for you. So when they're ready in your new environment and you're not worried about storing those, making sure where they're stored, and then making sure they make it to your newly refreshed environment. So another huge time saver here for all the admins. So what's new with it? It came out in EP5, John. Well, the two big ones for me are the IDP auth and distribution service settings. Again, just big time savers for the admins. IDP being a fairly new concept for a lot of folks, this really just lowers the complexity level for anyone involved. And so here, again, in dark mode, you see the EVM screen accessed, again, via URL or directly from the studio. So you can see here on the left, the long list of environmental variables along with the actual list of your environment variables in the main portion of the screen here. The item, the config type, and your source and destination values. We're almost there. Last but not least, third-party compatibility. So just real quickly, support for Microsoft Edge WebView 2. What this allows you to do is update Edge, Microsoft's Edge browser for Chromium patches. It just essentially lets us be less dependent on embedded Chromium. Additionally, there's support for Microsoft .NET 6 and Highland IDP 3.0. So with .NET Core 3.1 becoming end of support in December of this year, we just want to, again, give everyone a level sense of comfort knowing that while that would potentially impact several Highland products, all of those are now supported under .NET 6 as well. So you can feel confident that Highland's current with any security fixes. And then lastly, that IDP 3.0, it is a major release, and it of course supports .NET 6. Several other feature enhancements like federated logout from SAML, external identity providers, certificate-based authentication through federation to Okta and Keycloak, as well as a few others. But I need a break now. I'm going to kick it back over to you, Eric.
You need a break.
I need a break. I'll go on.
Should we bounce?
No,
Okay.
I'll be good after this.
Okay. Well, a couple slides ago, I'm not going to make you go back. A couple slides ago, though, you had a bullet point that said, check out the change control MRG.
Yes.
Or change, what was it? Change
management.
Change management MRG. Well, you know what? We don't have to go download that MRG anymore.
Go.
See, you didn't know how these were all going to be connected. See how we connected all these? I know, yeah. That MRG. Now, I remember back in the day, talking about us having 30 years of on-base experience, we used to have to download a zip file with all these MRGs, all of them, right? And then you'd have to think, well, wait, what MRG do I need to look up to find this information? And then I'd potentially go to 3 different ones. Oh, wait, is this in the web.config? Is this in the sysadmin? Like, you were having to go all over the place.
Yep.
Highland does a great job on documentation, tons of documentation, but that makes it really hard to find what you're looking for. So again, simple enhancement here, but there's now the Highland documentation portal. So now available with Foundation, starting with Foundation 22.1, you can go out and do a search on documentation that'll search across every MRG and pull back information. You can do filtering, searching, etc. And so here, let's say I do a search on looking for getting autofill data. It's now pulling back all of these different results based off of that search I put in there. These are all different documents that include that string of text that I keyed in there. So again, this might be surfacing 15 different documents that I need to take a look at, and it's everything from MRGs, but also has product overviews. It has all different levels of documentation I'm now able to search through. And if I go and bring up a document or a section of a document, because that's the key too, it'll actually, in this case, you see here, it pulled up the Enterprise Integration Server MRG directly to the section that I did the search on for autofill, getting autofill data. Then I can click the ellipsis, be able to then, maybe I want to bookmark that particular section, or maybe there's a team I'm working on that needs this information. I can share a URL, not just to the EIS MRG, but to this particular section of it. I can also bookmark it. If maybe there's a big project I'm working on that I need to keep going back to it, I can create a whole list of bookmarks and even create a collection of bookmarks tied to a particular project.
Absolutely, and if you've ever shared an MRG with someone, particularly the large ones, okay, well now I'll upload it to ShareBase because it's too big for our email server to share, so on and so forth. This is just great, a quick URL and take me right to it.
And for those of you that are on the Highland's new simplified pricing model, it'll also let you know what tier a particular product falls into. So here you can see up on the top left, it'll say that this is available under standard and premier, so you know if you have access to it, because with the new licensing model, there's a lot of stuff that's unlocked and you may or may not know if you have access to it based off of your licensing. So again, a very simple new addition, but huge impact to especially all of our administrators, but I think even our own internal support team.
100%, absolutely. All right.
Was that a good enough break?
That was a good enough break. I'm back with an additional SAP topic. I know Eric talked about one earlier. So for those of you already utilizing SAP today, and by the attendee list, I do know that some of you are even utilizing SuccessFactors today. We have a new on-base integration for it. So now the integration was actually released earlier this year, supported in EP5, but this integration starts, in my head, an exciting new chapter in the partnership between Highland and SAP. And if you're not already familiar, SuccessFactors is SAP's leading human capital management solution. So now we're taking that and we're adding a modern application integration architecture to it so that users can view, upload, and manage employee content directly from the SAP familiar screens SAP screens that they are familiar with today. So what this does is it accelerates your HR processes. It ensures that you're staying compliant and that your storage is in a secure format, and that you're being more productive with any interaction within SAP, as well as maximizing your investment, right? So it all begins, of course, in SAP SuccessFactors, right? Where thanks to a seamless integration, you'll have access to, again, that modern and intuitive on-base web application. So what you're seeing here, this doesn't look like your typical, on-base web client or Unity client that you're probably familiar with today, right? So let's take a closer look at the interface. So what you can see here along the left-hand side for this particular employee is a list of the different documents on the left, a list of the keywords that apply to those documents on the right. You have the ability to upload directly from this screen. So again, not going directly non-base, we're doing this from essentially SuccessFactors. And another really key important item with this, for those familiar with like a work view, we're contextually aware that we're on Dorian's pager. So when you upload a document, We're not entering in any keywords. We're just telling the system what type of document it is, right? We can be reminded or notified of any missing files we see there on the bottom left, and or even click on ad hoc tasks to move this candidate to a new stage, or maybe they need to, we need to do a performance evaluation on this end user. Again, all right from your existing leveraged investment from SAP SuccessFactors. So this way you can feel confident that, any information that you're uploading into this tool is going to be shared bidirectionally between the two applications.
Okay, well, I agree. It doesn't look like what we've seen in the past, whether it was the web client or Unity client, but I think it's a taste of what we're going to see.
Yes.
Right, and I think what we're seeing unveiled with OnBase 23.1, which will be next year, is that whole idea of just the user experience and UI enhancements is going to be one of the key tenets of Highland's strategy for OnBase going forward. So if we look at this, again, just for safe harbor reasons, obviously a lot of the stuff I'm going to show here in this section, you should be making any buying decisions off of what is in the product today. But I did want to give everyone a taste of what's in there. So from a theme perspective, I mean, this ties into what John was just talking about there, right? I want to be able to have that better user experience that is more role-based, because that is a perfect example of a role-based UI.
Absolutely.
Right? I was in SAP SuccessFactors, I clicked it, it now presented me a view as either an HR resource or a manager, where I've got all of the information about that employee in one concise view. I'm not worrying about all these other things inside of OnBase. It is designed for my particular role. So there's going to be that continued focus. There's also going to be a continued focus, which John will touch on here at the end as well. How do we make that hosted experience better as well? So for those of you that are thinking about moving to the Highland Cloud, John's going to talk about our partnership with AWS as a way to speed the delivery of these hosted products. Along that same front, we want to make sure that as we are deploying these products out on AWS or in your own environment, that we have this role-based experience, that we're doing it in a scalable and secure way. So you're going to continue to see enhancements related to security of the overall platform, making sure that as you continue to add content into it, that the system can scale, leverage some of that scalability of AWS, which is a huge advantage of leveraging the Highland Cloud. And then again, focused on a lot of that platform flexibility and integration. So John touched on a lot of the REST APIs. From an administrative perspective, I touched on a little bit from how we're using those from a workflow perspective, but the whole idea of ease of integration with other modern apps is going to be a continued theme as you start to see these releases of OnBase going forward.
And as you drive towards hyper-automation.
Man, full circle. So from a web client perspective, big focus on the user experience, focus on configurable home pages, customized dashboards, really trying to, again, create that user-specific environment, that role-based experience. So I'll just skip ahead so here's an example of one of these landing pages. So as I log into OnBase, I'm going to say, okay, I can go to my homepage. I can go to things that are tied to my role, right? Oh, I want to go to invoice processing because I'm an improver. I need to go into employee record management because I'm a manager of these employees. I need to go and access all of the content, do a normal document search. So, I mean, this kind of takes that whole idea of personal pages to a whole nother extreme and be able to define these as app-specific experiences for each individual. Because when I click into these, my experience is going to be different in every single one. I'm going to have a similar look and feel, but the screen layout is going to be designed based off of how I need to interact with that content and that data. So if I were to go up to employee record management, dive into that, now I'm in my employee file management app. I can see I've got my emergency requests that I need to help out with. I have some in-progress work. So again, even just defining the labels of things on the screen that are more intuitive to me, this is just workflow, right? Mm-hmm. But calling them emergency requests because they're in a higher priority, being able to see my in-progress work. being able to say, okay, well, I need to be able to view all of the documentation related to this individual. So I can go up to documents. Then from there, I can see the individual employees that I want to take a look at. I can look at their information. I can go to one and look at a record like Malcolm Reynolds here, see that information that's missing. But again, this whole look and feel is very different than what you've experienced in the past from an OnBase perspective. The whole design of this is all done within OnBase Studio, so it's able to take what you've already built and quickly build out these new designs with a drag and drop interface. So very exciting from a OnBase perspective on what's coming from a user experience. So again, we're gonna have theming updates, tablet support, being able to handle these landing pages, these personalized experiences, et cetera. And the same thing is gonna translate down from a mobile standpoint. So with that, we've got a few seconds left here, John, more than a few seconds, a few minutes left. Have you hit a little bit on AWS and our partnership there?
Yeah. So Eric kind of alluded to this in the previous slide, but you may have been hearing about AWS and Highland. What does that mean for us? Well, it means a couple of different things. First, and I think you've probably gathered this throughout today's session, but it's speed, right? And first of all, being speed to install. So now that the Highland Cloud is being deployed in AWS, it allows Highland to move much quicker, leading to a faster speed to install. And that's through a number of different ways, but a lot of that is through just allocation of those physical machines, right? We're living in a virtual world, but they still need to be allocated. And AWS, Amazon has the money to do that. And when we say we need something, it's there and it's ready for us. And that also means for changes to existing customers that need changes to their based off of an enhanced workload, or maybe, hey, we've thrown a ton of new users at this, we need to be able to scale quickly and appropriately. It also means additional configuration elements. So as you know, in the world of the cloud, for many of them without operating system level access, we rely on certain tools like the new administration portal that I mentioned earlier. And with AWS, we'll have additional configuration elements available in the cloud. So one of the things we hear from folks potentially moving to the cloud, well, I want to be able to have direct database access. Well, you won't have that. But with this partnership, you'll have those same tools and functionality that you had when you had direct access to SQL. And lastly, being in the AWS marketplace does allow for our government agencies and our government friends to potentially bypass the procurement process or an RFP process to procure OnBase. So again, kind of going back to that speed, it's just a different flavor of speed.
Perfect. And I know we've got to wrap up here at the last minute here, Julie, but I'm going to hit everyone with my last takeaway, which was connecting face-to-face was awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
I know for a lot of our customers that attended a CommunityLIVE, it was the first in-person event they've been to. Mm-hmm. And it was awesome just to be able to connect face-to-face, have conversations, and not just about work, just catching up face-to-face over the last 2.5, 3 years. Seeing people change a lot, right? Mm-hmm. I had hair, at the last CommunityLIVE. I had dark hair, and now I'm balding and gray. And so a lot changes, but it was amazing to see people face to face and even watching them connect with each other.
Yeah.
And not one personally, but also, oh, you're doing this with the software. Like that type of innovation exchange just doesn't happen when you're virtual.
No.
So, we had great opportunity, whether it was connecting at the events, the social hours, seeing bare naked ladies at the Brooklyn Bowl, whether it was a lot of the hands-on training, it was fantastic. We had killer keynotes with Bill Premer and Ed McQuiston from Highland, as well as the guest keynote that talked about her climb of Mount Everest and just what it took to do that. It was super empowering on that last day when you're kind of feeling like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm kind of conferenced out.
Hitting the
She
limit.
was an amazing pickup, but we also had the opportunity to host all of our customers at our event. Now, what we did a little bit different this year is that we co-hosted it with our sister company, ImageSoft. For those of you that aren't aware, and you'll see in the bottom left corner of all of our slides here, is that we were acquired in April of 2021 by a company called i3 Verticals based in Nashville, Tennessee. They acquired us in April of that year, and then the previous November, they had acquired Highland partner ImageSoft based in Detroit, Michigan. The beauty of our acquisition is that we've still been able to still be CureWorks. We're the same team with the same people doing the same stuff with the same great customers. The biggest advantage we have is that we have a partner in crime that does the exact same thing, and we can leverage ideas, leverage new ways to solve the same problems that we've addressed over the past, and how we handle new problems. So we're able to bring our customers from both CureWorks and ImageSoft for one event. We had the i3 executive team, since our meeting was in Nashville, joined us. So CEO Greg Daly came, as well as Clay, our CFO, joined us, as well as the entire Highland executive team as well. So it was an awesome event. And as part of that big takeaway of it being just great to connect with people, what we wanted to do too was invite everyone to a customer appreciation event in November. So next month in Milwaukee at 3rd Street Market Hall, we're going to be holding a customer appreciation event. You know, in the past, we've done things like Empower, Innovation. We've had millions of names for our conferences. But we thought, you know what, let's not worry about all the content. We can do content on these types of webinars. Let's just get people together. So on November 16th, we're inviting all of our customers, whether you're in the Milwaukee or Chicagoland area, or if you want to just come in town and hang out one night, we're going to be there. So take a look. You'll be getting an email from our marketing team this week on an invite to sign up to attend. We've got a really cool experience with a Topgolf swing suite. We've got lawn games, shuffleboard. There's indoor food trucks that you can order from. We'll have a bar open all night. And the whole idea is just get together and connect. So with that, I think we're probably over time, Julie, and probably don't have time for questions. But
We
if
don't.
we do have some, we'll definitely follow up with them after today's event. So
Yes.
I'll throw it back to you to wrap things up.
Well, I do want to thank both of you and your 30 years of experience that provided a lot of insight to today's topic. I hope that everyone will join us for that event in November, and be sure to mark your calendars for Community Live 23. We're in Vegas the first week of October. On behalf of CareWorks, I thank everyone for their time and enjoy the rest of your day.